If you enjoyed this audiobook, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Chapter 1: Why We Get It Wrong. Part 1: The Luck Trap. When Success Lies to Us. When Gary Vaynerchuk built Wine Library TV into a multi-million-dollar wine business, people called him a visionary who saw the future of video marketing. When Pandora's founders created their Music Genome Project, they were hailed as strategic geniuses who understood consumer behavior. Yet for every success story we celebrate, thousands of people tried identical approaches and failed completely. The uncomfortable truth is that most of what we label as skill is actually luck dressed up in a compelling story. Jerry Seinfeld once joked that he succeeded because he showed up consistently, but thousands of comedians showed up just as consistently and never got their break. The difference wasn't dedication or talent alone. It was timing, connections, and a dozen random factors that aligned in his favor. Consider the dot-com boom. For every Amazon that survived, hundreds of similar companies with equally smart founders and solid business plans disappeared. eToys had the same strategy as Amazon for selling online. Pets.com had passionate founders and massive funding. The winners weren't necessarily smarter. They were luckier with timing, funding cycles, and market conditions beyond their control. This creates a dangerous trap. When we succeed, our brains immediately start crafting a story about why we deserved it. We highlight our brilliant decisions and downplay the role of chance. Confirmation bias kicks in, filtering our memories to support this narrative. We remember the market research that predicted success, but forget the warnings we ignored. The real problem isn't that luck exists, it's that we refuse to acknowledge its role. Venture capitalist Randy Komisar admits that even successful investors are wrong more often than right. The difference between good and great investors isn't their hit rate, it's their ability to recognize when they got lucky and avoid betting everything on repeating what might have been a fluke. Survivorship bias compounds this illusion. We study successful companies and extract lessons from their strategies, ignoring the fact that failed companies often used identical playbooks. Harvard Business School teaches cases about visionary CEOs who made bold moves that paid off. They don't teach courses about equally visionary leaders whose bold moves destroyed their companies. This doesn't mean skill doesn't matter. It means success usually requires both skill and luck working together. The most dangerous leaders are those who can't tell the difference. Part 2: Seeing patterns in chaos. Looking around your office, you might see patterns everywhere. This quarter's sales bump, that competitor's 3-month winning streak, the sudden shift in customer complaints. Your brain can't help itself. It's a pattern detection machine that never sleeps. This talent kept our ancestors alive. The rustle in the bushes might be wind, but it could also be a predator. Those who noticed patterns and connected dots survived to pass on their genes. Those who dismissed patterns as random noise became dinner. But what saved us in the savannah can sabotage us in conference rooms. Our brains still operate like we're scanning for threats in tall grass, not analyzing spreadsheets and market data. When Netflix's stock jumped 20% in 3 days back in 2013, financial blogs were quick to identify the obvious pattern. Streaming was clearly winning over cable. The real reason? A computer glitch in trading algorithms that lasted exactly 3 days. We turn coincidences into strategies. When Starbucks closed 8,000 stores for racial bias training in 2018, their stock dropped 3%. Some analysts declared this proved customers hated virtue signaling. But the stock recovered within a week, and same-store sales grew that quarter. The initial drop was just noise. Investors reacting to headlines, not fundamentals. Your quarterly results show 3 months of growth. Is this a trend or just normal business fluctuation? Your new hires started the same week revenue jumped. Did they cause the boost or just show up during a lucky period? Your marketing campaign coincided with a competitor's scandal. Was your strategy brilliant or your timing fortunate? The pattern trap gets worse in business because we build entire dashboards around it. Red and green arrows create the illusion that every wiggle means something. CEOs present quarterly results like they personally controlled every variable that quarter. Product managers see user engagement spike after a feature launch and declare victory, ignoring that usage always spikes right after any change, good or bad. Here's a simple test that works in most situations. Ask yourself what else could explain what you're seeing. When your team's performance suddenly improves, consider seasonal factors, industry changes, or pure randomness before crediting your leadership style. When a competitor stumbles 3 times in a row, resist the urge to assume they've lost their edge permanently. Compare what you're seeing against normal baseline rates. If customer complaints typically fluctuate between 50 and 150 per month, don't panic when you hit 140. If your conversion rate normally bounces between 2% and 4%, don't celebrate too hard when you hit 3.8%. The goal isn't to stop seeing patterns entirely. That would be impossible and dangerous. Instead, hold them lightly. Let patterns inform your thinking without controlling your decisions. Part 3. The stories we tell ourselves. Your brain is a storyteller that never stops editing, and its favorite story is the one where you were always destined to succeed. When Mark Benioff founded Salesforce in 1999, the official story became a tale of visionary genius. He saw the future of cloud computing before anyone else and boldly bet everything on it. The reality was messier. Benioff was running out of money, Oracle competitors were breathing down his neck, and he stumbled into the subscription model partly because upfront software licensing was too expensive for startups. But success has a way of cleaning up the rough edges. This isn't dishonesty. It's how memory works. Your mind automatically smooths out the randomness, the near misses, and the dumb luck that shaped your path. A promotion becomes proof of your strategic thinking rather than the result of your boss leaving unexpectedly. A failed project gets reframed as a valuable learning experience rather than poor judgment and bad timing. Leaders fall hardest into this trap because everyone around them reinforces the polished version. When Reed Hastings talks about Netflix's shift from DVDs to streaming, the story sounds inevitable. But former employees remember the panic, the internal resistance, and the board meetings where bankruptcy felt real. The messy version disappears because it serves nobody's interests. These edited stories feel good, but they make you stupid. If you believe your success came from brilliant foresight, you'll try to repeat strategies that worked mostly by accident. If you think your failures were just bad luck, you'll miss the real lessons hiding in the wreckage. The antidote is narrative hygiene. After big decisions play out, write down 3 different explanations for what happened. Ask people who were there to share their unfiltered memories before time sanitizes them. When someone praises your great judgment, dig deeper. What information were you missing? What could have gone differently with one small change? Sarah Blakely, founder of Spanx, keeps a failure journal where she records not just what went wrong, but how confident she felt beforehand and why her reasoning seemed airtight at the time. This practice prevents her from rewriting history and keeps her humble about future predictions. Your stories shape your decisions. When you clean them up too much, you lose touch with how uncertainty really works. The goal isn't to become cynical about your abilities, but to remember that every success story has an alternative ending where things went badly for perfectly good reasons. Part 4. Your body decides before you do. When JP Morgan trader Bruno Ixel made the disastrous London whale trades in 2012, losing the bank $6.2 billion, investigators found something telling in his final weeks. His emails, sent at all hours, showed escalating panic. His trades grew bigger and more desperate. His body had been screaming warnings, but his conscious mind kept doubling down. Your heart starts racing before you even realize a decision is risky. Your palms sweat during negotiations before you consciously register the other person's tactics. Your stomach tightens when reviewing a budget, signaling problems your analytical mind hasn't yet spotted. This isn't weakness or intuition. It's your nervous system processing information faster than your thinking brain can catch up. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio studied patients with damage to brain regions that connect emotion and reasoning. These people could analyze decisions perfectly on paper, but made terrible choices in real life. They lacked the physical signals that guide good judgment. Their bodies couldn't feel the weight of consequences. Sleep-deprived executives make riskier decisions. Hungry judges give harsher sentences right before lunch. Traders with higher cortisol levels make more volatile bets. Amazon's Jeff Bezos famously makes important decisions only in the morning when his energy is highest. He protects his peak decision-making hours like a precious resource. Think about your worst professional decisions. Were you tired, stressed, fighting a deadline, running on coffee and adrenaline? Your body was likely pushing you toward quick fixes and familiar patterns. Stress hormones narrow your focus to immediate threats, making long-term thinking nearly impossible. Reid Hoffman, LinkedIn's founder, learned to recognize his body's decision signals. When his chest felt tight during investor meetings, he'd pause and ask deeper questions instead of rushing to agreement. When his breathing was shallow during product reviews, he knew to slow down and gather more data. Your body broadcasts its state through dozens of signals. Tense shoulders during team meetings, fidgeting fingers when reviewing contracts, a racing pulse when someone challenges your strategy. These aren't distractions. They're information about how your current state might skew your choices. The solution isn't to ignore these signals, but to work with them. Schedule crucial decisions for when you're physically and mentally fresh. Create reset rituals between high-stakes conversations. Take 3 deep breaths before responding to challenging emails. These small practices give your reasoning mind space to catch up with your body's rapid-fire assessments. Smart leaders design their decision-making around their biology. Chapter 2. Building Your Uncertainty Toolkit. Part 1. The Power of I Don't Know. Most leadership failures start with 3 dangerous words. I know this. In 2006, Yahoo's executive team repeatedly assured investors they understood Google's business model and could replicate it. They knew search would remain secondary to portal strategies. They knew social media was a fad. This confidence cost them everything. The real tragedy happens daily in quieter settings. A project manager promises delivery dates without checking technical constraints. A startup founder pitches growth projections based on wishful thinking rather than market data. A department head commits to budget numbers that feel right rather than calculating actual costs. Each time, fake certainty creates bigger problems than honest uncertainty ever could. Reed Hastings took a different approach when Netflix faced the streaming transition. During a 2012 investor call, he openly stated, "We don't know exactly how this will play out, but we're committed to learning fast." Wall Street punished the stock initially, but this intellectual honesty allowed Netflix to adapt quickly, while competitors like Blockbuster clung to outdated certainties. Why do smart people pretend to know more than they do? Most workplace cultures punish visible uncertainty. Admitting ignorance feels like career suicide when promotions depend on appearing confident. Teams expect leaders to have answers, not questions. This creates a feedback loop where everyone performs knowledge they don't possess. The solution starts with reframing uncertainty as partial knowledge. You might not know everything, but you probably know enough to take the next step. Amazon's Jeff Bezos called this disagree and commit. Moving forward despite incomplete information, rather than waiting for perfect clarity that never comes. Practice saying, "I don't know," followed by "yet" or "but here's what we can test." This small addition transforms ignorance from weakness into methodology. When a team member asks about market size, try, "I don't know the exact numbers, but we can survey 50 potential customers this week." The focus shifts from having answers to finding them. Watch how your credibility actually increases when you separate what you know from what you're guessing. Teams trust leaders who distinguish between facts and assumptions because it creates psychological safety for everyone to acknowledge their own knowledge gaps. Great leaders treat "I don't know" as the beginning of better questions, not the end of useful conversation. This intellectual humility becomes your competitive advantage when everyone else is pretending certainty they don't possess. Part 2. Signals versus noise. What actually matters? Your phone buzzes 16 times before lunch, each notification claiming to be urgent, important, or breaking news. Most of what screams for your attention today won't matter next week. The truly important signals whisper while the noise shouts. When Howard Schultz was building Starbucks, he could have obsessed over daily sales fluctuations, competitor promotions, or customer complaints about wait times. Instead, he watched one quiet signal: whether people lingered after buying their coffee. That subtle behavior told him something profound about what Starbucks could become. Consider Netflix in 2007. While media analysts debated DVD pricing and Blockbuster's response strategies, Netflix executives tracked a different signal entirely. They measured how quickly customers adopted their streaming pilot program, even though streaming represented less than 1% of their business. That whisper-quiet metric guided their bet-the-company decision to abandon DVDs. The loud voices predicted Netflix would fail. The quiet signal said otherwise. The modern workplace drowns us in information. Marketing teams track conversion rates, click-through rates, engagement rates, and retention rates. Sales teams monitor pipeline velocity, deal size trends, and competitor win rates. Operations teams watch efficiency metrics, quality scores, and customer satisfaction surveys. Each department generates dashboards full of colorful charts that update in real time. This flood creates an illusion of insight while obscuring what actually drives results. Most metrics move randomly or reflect short-term fluctuations that reverse themselves within weeks. The few that matter tend to change slowly and subtly, like customer lifetime value, employee turnover among top performers, or the percentage of revenue from products launched in the past 2 years. Reed Hastings learned this lesson early at Netflix. He noticed that customer service call volumes spiked whenever they changed their website design, but the calls dropped to normal levels within days as people adapted. However, when customers stopped logging in for 2 weeks straight, they almost never returned. One pattern was noise masquerading as signal. The other was signal hiding as routine data. The secret lies in asking, what would still matter a year from now? Most urgent problems solve themselves or become irrelevant. Most exciting opportunities fade or get replaced by better ones. But the quiet indicators of fundamental change persist and compound over time. Jeff Bezos applied this filter religiously at Amazon. While competitors focused on quarterly earnings beats and daily stock price movements, he tracked customer acquisition costs, repeat purchase behavior, and operational efficiency gains. These slower-moving signals guided decisions that seemed irrational in the short term, but proved transformative over decades. Building your personal shortlist requires ruthless editing. Start with everything you currently monitor, then eliminate anything that doesn't influence decisions 6 months out. Most leaders discover they can ignore 90% of their information diet without missing anything important. The remaining 10% becomes crystal clear when the noise fades away. Part 3. Thinking in bets, not certainties. When you filter out the noise and identify what truly matters, the next step seems deceptively simple. Make a decision. But here's where most people stumble. They treat every choice like a final exam where one wrong answer ruins everything. That mindset kills good judgment faster than any other thinking error. Smart leaders think differently. They treat decisions like poker players treat hands, as bets placed with incomplete information, not verdicts carved in stone. This subtle shift changes everything about how you approach uncertainty. Consider Reed Hastings when Netflix decided to split their DVD and streaming services in 2011. Customers revolted. Stock price plummeted 40%. But Hastings wasn't thinking about being right or wrong. He was thinking about odds. What were the chances that streaming would eventually dominate entertainment? What did Netflix gain if they moved early? What did they lose if they waited too long and competitors caught up? The backlash hurt, but Hastings knew his process was sound. He had placed a bet based on reasonable assumptions about technology trends and consumer behavior. The short-term pain didn't invalidate the long-term logic. This perspective protects you from 2 dangerous traps. First, it prevents you from freezing up because you can't guarantee success. No bet comes with guarantees. Second, it stops you from beating yourself up when good decisions produce bad outcomes, something that happens more often than we admit. Think about the last major decision you made. Did you write down your reasoning beforehand? Most people don't, which means they can't learn from experience. They only remember the outcome, not the thinking that led to it. Start treating your next important choice like placing a bet. Before you decide, write down 3 things: the odds as you see them, what you gain if you're right, and what you lose if you're wrong. This forces clarity about your actual reasoning instead of gut feelings dressed up as analysis. Good decision-makers get comfortable being wrong for the right reasons. They improve their betting process, not their crystal ball. That's how you turn uncertainty from an enemy into a tool. Part 4. Learning from what stays the same. While the world seems to change at breakneck speed, the most reliable compass for leaders lies in recognizing what never changes at all. Jeff Bezos built Amazon's strategy around this insight. In 1997, when everyone obsessed over which technologies would dominate, he focused on 3 constants. Customers would always want lower prices, faster delivery, and bigger selection. These truths held whether people shopped in physical stores or through dial-up internet. 25 years later, those same drives power Amazon's decisions about drones, warehouses, and cloud computing. Consider the dot-com boom and bust. Companies that chased hot trends like banner ads and portal strategies collapsed when the landscape shifted. But businesses built on enduring patterns survived. People still needed to buy things. They still wanted convenience. They still made decisions based on trust and word-of-mouth recommendations. Smart leaders asked not what technology will win, but how will basic human nature express itself in this new environment. The pharmaceutical industry offers another example. Drug development takes 15 years from lab to market. Companies that succeed don't try to predict which diseases will trend. Instead, they focus on constants. People fear death, value independence, and want to avoid pain. These motivations drive healthcare decisions whether the year is 1950 or 2025. Think about your own industry. What drives your customers that hasn't changed in decades? Status matters to luxury buyers. Parents worry about their children's futures. Businesses need to reduce costs and increase revenue. Employees want recognition and fair treatment. These patterns persist across economic cycles, technological shifts, and cultural changes. During uncertain times, leaders often make 2 mistakes. They either freeze, overwhelmed by unpredictable variables, or they chase every new trend. Both approaches ignore the stable foundation that can guide sound judgment. Start building your own list of constants. What human behaviors show up consistently in your organization? Which customer needs remain steady regardless of external conditions? What competitive dynamics play out the same way across different industries and time periods? When Reed Hastings pivoted Netflix from DVDs to streaming, he didn't predict the future of technology. He bet on an unchanging truth. People want entertainment delivered conveniently to their homes. The delivery method could evolve, but the underlying desire remained constant. This approach turns uncertainty into a manageable challenge. Instead of trying to forecast specific outcomes, you can ask how predictable human tendencies will interact with new circumstances. The next time you feel overwhelmed by change, return to these fundamentals. Ground your decisions in what you know about human nature, market forces, and organizational behavior. These constants won't tell you exactly what will happen, but they'll help you make better bets about what probably will. Chapter 3. Preparing for Black Swans. Part 1. The Danger of Normal Days. The scariest words in business are often "everything is fine" when whispered for too long. Normal days can be deadly precisely because they feel so safe. Consider Blockbuster in 2004. Their quarterly reports showed steady profits. Customers visited stores regularly. Late fees generated predictable revenue. Every metric screamed success. Yet this very stability masked a fatal weakness. The entire business model depended on one untested assumption. people would always drive to physical stores for entertainment. When Netflix shifted to streaming, Blockbuster's normal became their nightmare. This pattern repeats everywhere. Kodak dominated film photography for decades. Their engineers even invented the digital camera in 1975. But normal profits from film sales felt too comfortable to abandon. The company optimized for yesterday's world while tomorrow quietly arrived. Your career might follow the same trap. Maybe you've mastered a specific software, built relationships with certain clients, or specialized in one industry. Everything flows smoothly. But ask yourself, what happens if that software becomes obsolete? If those clients consolidate? If that industry shrinks? Normal days don't signal safety. They signal untested vulnerabilities. Banking offers another stark example. Before 2008, mortgage-backed securities seemed like magic. Housing prices had risen for decades. Risk models showed minimal downside. Complex financial instruments spread risk across the system. Everything appeared normal until it wasn't. The very interconnectedness that felt like protection became the mechanism for total collapse. Normal days breed three dangerous habits. First, we stop questioning our assumptions. Second, we optimize for efficiency instead of resilience. Third, we mistake temporary stability for permanent strength. The antidote isn't paranoia, but curiosity. When everything runs smoothly, that's precisely when leaders should ask uncomfortable questions. What if our biggest client leaves? What if our key employee quits? What if our main revenue source disappears? These questions feel unnecessary during good times. That's exactly when they matter most. Netflix understood this principle. Even while dominating DVD mail delivery, they invested heavily in streaming technology. They cannibalized their own successful business before someone else could. They treated their normal days as borrowed time, not earned comfort. Smart leaders develop what pilots call situational awareness during calm flights. They scan instruments not because something is wrong, but because nothing obvious is wrong. They know that dangerous weather often builds slowly, invisibly, until it suddenly becomes unavoidable. Your next normal day might be your last. Part 2. Making friends with randomness. Most business leaders treat random events like unwelcome house guests who show up at the worst possible time. They build elaborate plans designed to keep surprises out, then act shocked when reality refuses to follow the script. But what if randomness isn't the enemy of good leadership? What if it's actually one of your most valuable advisors? Consider how Brian Chesky stumbled onto Airbnb's breakthrough moment. In 2008, during the Democratic National Convention, he and his roommate couldn't afford rent. They bought air mattresses, created a simple website, and rented floor space to conference attendees. This wasn't strategic planning. It was desperation meeting opportunity through pure chance. Yet that random moment of financial pressure revealed something profound about how people actually wanted to travel and connect. The conventional response to unexpected events is damage control. Companies create risk management departments whose job is essentially to make randomness go away. But this approach misses something crucial. Random events often carry information you would never think to ask for. When your top salesperson quits unexpectedly, you might discover your sales process was actually broken. When a product fails in ways you never imagined, customers often tell you what they really needed. Amazon's Jeff Bezos built this principle into his company's DNA. He deliberately kept a portion of Amazon's resources available for unexpected opportunities. When the dot-com crash happened in 2000, most companies panicked and cut everything. Bezos saw it as a chance to hire talented engineers at reasonable prices and invest in infrastructure while costs were low. The randomness that destroyed competitors actually strengthened Amazon. Think about your own career for a moment. How many of your biggest breaks came from planned networking events versus chance encounters? How many solutions emerged from experiments you never intended to run? Most people resist these moments because they feel chaotic and uncontrollable. But that resistance makes you brittle. Smart leaders develop what I call productive paranoia, paired with generous curiosity. They assume surprises will happen, but they approach each one as a potential teacher rather than an automatic threat. They ask better questions when things go sideways. What assumption just got challenged? What does this tell us about how the world really works? What opportunity might be hiding inside this disruption? This doesn't mean becoming passive or fatalistic. It means building randomness into your planning process. Set aside budget for experiments that might fail. Schedule time for conversations that have no clear agenda. Create space in your strategy for ideas that don't fit the current model. When Southwest Airlines started allowing employees to improvise within clear boundaries, they didn't get chaos. They got customer service stories that became legend, and a culture that could adapt faster than competitors. The goal isn't to predict which random events will matter. The goal is to be less surprised that surprises happen, and more skilled at extracting value when they do. Part 3. Systems that love chaos. Some companies treat chaos like an unwelcome guest, while others set an extra place at the table and watch their profits soar when storms hit. When Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans in 2005, Walmart's emergency response outperformed FEMA. The retail giant had built what they called a network effect system. Instead of one central command making all decisions, individual store managers could override corporate policies instantly. They could open locked pharmacies, give away free goods, or turn parking lots into refugee centers without waiting for approval. Each store became a node that could function independently while staying connected to the larger network. This wasn't accident. Walmart had deliberately designed fragility out of their system years earlier. They spread suppliers across multiple regions, maintained relationships with backup vendors, and trained managers to think like small business owners. When disaster struck, competitors with centralized systems waited for headquarters to decide, while Walmart adapted in real time. Netflix followed a similar approach when they transitioned from DVDs to streaming. Instead of betting everything on one technology shift, they maintained both systems simultaneously for years. They called it dual operating, and it cost extra money every month. Critics called it wasteful, but when streaming finally took off, Netflix captured the market while Blockbuster collapsed, trying to manage a single sudden transition. Consider your own career structure. Do you have one skill that pays all your bills? One client who represents most of your income? One professional network in a single industry? These create what engineers call single points of failure. Amazon CEO Andy Jassy built his reputation across multiple domains before leading AWS. His background spanned business development, marketing, and technology implementation. When Amazon needed someone to run their cloud division, his diverse skill set became invaluable. Personal chaos-resistant systems share common features. They have multiple income streams that don't all depend on the same economic conditions. They maintain relationships across different industries and age groups. They develop skills that transfer between domains. A project manager who understands both technology and human psychology can work in healthcare, finance, or entertainment. The key difference lies in how you respond when something breaks. Fragile systems require specific conditions to function. Chaos-resistant systems get stronger when stressed, like muscles that grow from lifting weights. They turn volatility into fuel for growth rather than a threat to survival. Part 4. Planning for the unplannable. The best preparation for surprise happens months before you need it, when everything feels perfectly normal. When Southwest Airlines designed their operating procedures in the 1970s, they built something unusual into their system. Every plane could be flown by any pilot. Every route could be operated with any aircraft in their fleet. Every gate could handle any Southwest flight. This wasn't efficient by traditional airline standards, but it meant that when weather shut down Dallas or mechanical problems grounded half their fleet, they could keep flying while competitors canceled thousands of flights. This principle works for individuals too. Consider how Reid Hoffman, LinkedIn's founder, approached his career. Instead of betting everything on one startup idea, he maintained relationships across venture capital, entrepreneurship, and corporate strategy. When his first company sold, he had multiple options for what to do next. When LinkedIn faced competition, he could draw on insights from completely different industries. His preparation wasn't specific to any one scenario, but it made him ready for many. The secret lies in understanding what preparation actually means. Most people think preparation means predicting what will happen and making a detailed plan. But real preparation means building capacity to respond well to things you cannot predict. It's the difference between stockpiling winter coats for a blizzard and staying physically fit so you can handle whatever weather comes. Warren Buffett calls this keeping dry powder ready. Berkshire Hathaway always maintains cash reserves, not because Buffett knows when the next market crash will happen, but because he knows crashes happen and opportunities emerge from chaos. When COVID-19 hit in 2020, companies with strong balance sheets could acquire struggling competitors or invest in new technologies while everyone else fought for survival. For personal decisions, this translates into simple practices. Keep 3 months of expenses and savings, not because you know you'll lose your job in February, but because job losses happen. Develop skills that work in multiple industries, not because you plan to switch careers, but because industries evolve unpredictably. Maintain relationships with people who think differently than you do, not because you know you'll need their perspective, but because fresh viewpoints become crucial when your assumptions break down. The emotional side matters just as much as the practical side. When Airbnb's bookings dropped 90% in early 2020, the founders didn't panic because they had rehearsed extreme scenarios. They had discussed questions like, what if travel stopped completely during normal times when the stakes were low? This mental preparation helped them respond with creativity instead of fear. Planning for the unplannable means accepting that your current plan will not survive contact with reality, and that's perfectly fine. The goal is building the muscle to adapt quickly when change arrives. Chapter 4. The Practice of Deciding Better. Part 1. The Forecaster's Mindset. When Philip Tetlock began studying political experts in 1984, he discovered something remarkable. The pundits who appeared most confident on television were often the least accurate at predicting world events. What separated the good forecasters from the rest wasn't intelligence or insider knowledge. It was how they approached uncertainty itself. The best ones treated each prediction like a scientist treats a hypothesis, something to test, not defend. Take Sarah, a software development manager at Spotify. When her team estimates project timelines, she doesn't ask for single dates. Instead, she requests ranges. When do you think we'll ship this feature? Becomes, what's the earliest realistic date, the most likely date, and the latest you'd expect? This simple shift changes everything. Her developers stop anchoring on overly optimistic best-case scenarios and start thinking through what could actually happen. Most of us make predictions constantly without realizing it. You guess how long your commute will take. You estimate whether a new hire will work out. You predict customer response to a product change. But here's the problem. We rarely write these expectations down or check how we did later. Amazon's Jeff Bezos famously kept a disagree and commit culture, but he also maintained prediction journals. When executives made big bets, they documented their reasoning and expected outcomes. 6 months later, they'd revisit these notes not to assign blame, but to learn what signals they'd missed or overweighted. The key insight is treating predictions as experiments rather than declarations of truth. When Netflix's Reed Hastings predicted streaming would overtake DVDs, he didn't stake his entire identity on being right. He ran tests, gathered data, and adjusted his timeline as new information emerged. Good forecasters break big questions into smaller, more manageable pieces. Instead of asking, will our product succeed? They ask, how many users will sign up in month 1? What percentage will still be active after 3 months? These smaller questions are easier to calibrate and provide clearer feedback for improvement. The real skill isn't being right more often, it's being less wrong over time. This means updating your view when evidence shifts, even if it's uncomfortable. It means separating your ego from your predictions and treating uncertainty as information, not enemy. Part 2. Small experiments, big insights. That gap between making predictions and testing them disappears completely when you start experimenting. Think of it this way. Forecasting tells you what might happen, but experimenting shows you what actually does happen. The difference is everything. Amazon figured this out early. Instead of spending months debating whether customers would buy books online, Jeff Bezos started small. He packed books in his garage, shipped them himself, and watched what happened. Within weeks, he had real data about customer behavior that no focus group could have provided. The experiment was cheap, fast, and packed with information. Most people resist this approach because experiments feel risky. But here's the thing: not experimenting is the bigger risk. Reed Hastings at Netflix learned this when he tested streaming alongside DVD rentals. His team worried about cannibalizing their profitable DVD business. But the small streaming experiment revealed something surprising. Customers loved the convenience so much they were willing to pay for both services. That tiny test eventually became Netflix's entire future. The magic happens when you treat experiments like questions you're asking reality. Instead of, "Will this work?" you're asking, "What happens if we try this small version?" Sarah Blakely did this with Spanx. She didn't quit her job and bet everything on shapewear. She kept her day job selling fax machines while testing her prototype with friends and department store buyers. Each conversation was an experiment that taught her something new about the market. Your experiments don't need to be business ventures. Maybe you're thinking about changing careers. Instead of making the leap blindly, try shadowing someone for a day. Volunteer in that field for a weekend. Take on a small project that gives you a taste of the work. These mini experiments cost almost nothing, but reveal whether your assumptions match reality. The key is designing experiments that can fail safely, but teach you plenty. Dropbox did this brilliantly. Instead of building their entire file-sharing platform first, they created a simple video showing how it would work. The overwhelming response to that video told them everything they needed to know about demand before writing a single line of code. Great experimenters share one trait: they're more curious than they are attached to being right. They plant many small seeds and pay attention to what sprouts naturally. Part 3. When the numbers don't help. But what happens when your spreadsheets offer conflicting answers, or worse, no clear direction at all? Reed Hastings faced this exact challenge when Netflix decided to split its DVD and streaming services in 2011. The data told multiple stories simultaneously. Subscriber growth was strong, but DVD usage was declining unpredictably. Streaming costs were rising, but at what rate? The numbers painted a picture so murky that any conclusion seemed equally defensible. Hastings made a choice that lost Netflix 800,000 subscribers and tanked the stock price by 80%. Yet he later called it one of their most important decisions. Why? Because he stopped pretending the data was clearer than it actually was. Instead of hiding behind elaborate forecasts, he admitted the numbers couldn't answer the real question: would people eventually prefer streaming over physical discs? This happens more often than leaders admit. McKinsey found that 72% of executives say they've made major decisions with incomplete or contradictory data in the past year. The temptation is always the same: massage the numbers until they tell a confident story, or delay until more data arrives. Both approaches often backfire. Smart leaders treat numbers like weather reports, useful but not gospel. When Airbnb's founders were deciding whether to expand internationally in 2012, their conversion data from different countries varied wildly. Some markets showed promise, others looked terrible. But the data couldn't capture cultural nuances or regulatory risks that would determine success. Instead of waiting for perfect metrics, they created what they called guardrails. They wouldn't enter any country where they couldn't establish local partnerships. They wouldn't launch without understanding basic legal requirements. They wouldn't commit more than 6 months of runway to any single market. These rules didn't predict success, but they prevented catastrophic failure. The most dangerous trap is using numbers to avoid responsibility. When leaders demand more analysis before deciding, they're often seeking cover, not clarity. The analysis becomes an elaborate form of procrastination. Real wisdom lies in knowing when you have enough information to act intelligently, even if you don't have enough to act perfectly. Consider numbers as one voice in a crowded room. Listen to them, but also hear from experience, values, and gut instinct. Great decisions emerge from that conversation, not from any single source of truth. The courage to choose despite incomplete data often separates leaders who thrive in uncertainty from those who merely survive it. Part 4. Staying calm when it matters most. When Airbnb's bookings dropped 95% in March 2020, CEO Brian Chesky had every reason to panic. Instead, he did something that saved the company. He bought time to think clearly. Pressure has a way of making smart people do dumb things. When stakes feel high and time feels short, our brains shift into survival mode. This ancient wiring served our ancestors well when running from predators, but it works against us in modern crises. Under stress, we see fewer options, jump to conclusions faster, and mistake urgency for importance. The most costly business decisions often happen in these heated moments. Quibi's founders rushed to launch their billion-dollar streaming service during lockdown, without testing whether people actually wanted to watch premium shows on phones. Meanwhile, companies like Zoom took a different approach. When their usage exploded 30-fold almost overnight, they resisted the urge to immediately monetize the surge. Instead, they focused on keeping systems stable, earning trust that paid dividends later. What separates leaders who thrive in chaos from those who crumble? It's not ice-cold composure or supernatural confidence. It's the ability to create just enough mental space to see one additional option. That extra option often makes all the difference. The first tool is tempo control. When everything feels urgent, deliberately slow down your decision rhythm. Warren Buffett famously waits 20 minutes before making any significant choice during market volatility. This isn't about delaying action. It's about ensuring your next move is chosen, not triggered. Next, name what's actually at stake. Our minds love catastrophic stories. A product launch delay becomes, "we'll lose everything." A difficult conversation becomes, "this relationship is over." Write down the real risks versus the dramatic narrative your brain is creating. Often, the gap is enormous. Build decision infrastructure during calm periods. Netflix maintains clear escalation protocols and pre-agreed spending limits so teams don't have to invent processes during crises. They know who decides what at each level, eliminating the chaos that comes from unclear authority. Create trusted sounding boards before you need them. Reid Hoffman, LinkedIn's founder, maintains relationships with advisors he can call within hours of any major challenge. These aren't formal board meetings. They're quick reality checks with people who've seen similar situations. Perfect calm isn't the goal. Even seasoned leaders feel stressed during tough moments. The difference is they've trained themselves to function effectively while feeling that stress, like athletes who perform despite pre-game nerves. They're not fearless, they're just calm enough to think one step ahead. Chapter 5. Leading Through the Fog, Part 1. Building Teams That Handle Uncertainty. When Amanda Scott became head of product at Spotify in 2014, she inherited a team that hoarded information like squirrels preparing for winter. Engineers kept critical insights to themselves, designers worked in isolation, and nobody wanted to be the bearer of bad news. The result? Projects that looked perfect on paper, but crashed spectacularly when they met real users. Scott's first move wasn't hiring smarter people or implementing new tools. Instead, she started something radical: failure parties. Every month, teams would gather to share their biggest mistakes, what went wrong, and what they learned. The twist? The person who shared the most valuable failure story got a bottle of champagne. This simple ritual transformed how uncertainty flowed through the organization. When Apple Music launched as a direct competitor, Scott's team didn't panic or pretend everything was fine. Instead, they openly discussed what this meant for their strategy. Junior developers challenged senior architects. Data analysts questioned product assumptions. The team changed direction 3 times in 6 months, each pivot informed by collective wisdom rather than executive hunches. The magic wasn't in the specific ritual, but in what it created: psychological safety in measurable form. Harvard Business School's Amy Edmondson studied hundreds of teams and found that the highest-performing groups weren't those that made fewer mistakes. They were teams where people felt safe reporting problems early, asking naive questions, and admitting when they didn't understand something. Consider how Reed Hastings handled Netflix's Quickster disaster in 2011. Instead of defending the decision in isolation, he brought his entire leadership team into public accountability. They collectively analyzed what went wrong, shared the reasoning process, and explained how they would approach similar decisions differently. Customer trust actually increased because people saw a team learning together rather than a CEO making excuses alone. Building teams that handle uncertainty well requires designing for distributed intelligence. When Jeff Bezos created Amazon's two-pizza rule, no meeting should require more than 2 pizzas to feed everyone. He wasn't just fighting bureaucracy. He was ensuring that every person in the room could meaningfully contribute to solving problems nobody had seen before. The best uncertainty-ready teams share 3 observable habits. They treat changing your mind as evidence of learning, not weakness. They create multiple channels for bad news to travel upward quickly. And they assume that the quietest person in the room might have the insight that saves the project. Part 2. Creating your decision rituals. Dan Gilbert knew his Cleveland Cavaliers needed LeBron James back, but he couldn't afford to make the decision based on desperation alone. Gilbert had established a ritual long before that crucial moment in 2014. Before any major decision, he would spend exactly 30 minutes walking alone around downtown Cleveland, asking himself 3 questions. What am I trying to accomplish? What could go wrong? Who else needs to weigh in? This wasn't an elaborate ceremony, just a predictable pause that forced him to step outside the immediate pressure. During that walk, considering LeBron's potential return, Gilbert realized his anger over the 2010 departure was clouding his judgment. The ritual didn't tell him what to decide, but it created space between feeling and choosing. He eventually welcomed LeBron back, leading to Cleveland's first championship in over 50 years. Most leaders make their hardest decisions while juggling 10 other crises, surrounded by people pushing for quick answers. Your brain, already stretched thin, defaults to whatever feels most urgent or familiar. This is why rituals matter. They create consistent conditions for better thinking, regardless of the surrounding chaos. Reed Hastings at Netflix built a different kind of ritual around major strategic decisions. Before committing to something like canceling a show or entering a new market, he requires what he calls a disagree and commit session. The team spends exactly 1 hour arguing against the proposed decision, looking for holes and blind spots. Only after that hour can they move forward. This simple structure has helped Netflix avoid countless expensive mistakes. The most effective decision rituals share 3 qualities. They happen at a predictable time or trigger. They involve a specific set of questions or actions, and they feel natural rather than forced. Warren Buffett's ritual is reading for hours in his Omaha office before major investments. Oprah's involves journaling 3 pages before any significant personal decision. Both create space for reflection in lives that could easily become pure reaction. Your rituals don't need to be elaborate. They just need to interrupt your default patterns. Maybe you walk around the block before firing someone. Maybe you sleep on any decision involving more than $10,000. Maybe you call one person outside your organization before announcing a major change. The specific ritual matters less than having one that consistently engages your more thoughtful self rather than your reactive one. These small practices become the invisible structure supporting better choices when everything around you feels unpredictable. Part 3. The courage to pivot. Most executives would rather double down on a failing strategy than admit they were wrong. This instinct destroyed Blockbuster, while Netflix pivoted from DVDs to streaming. Reed Hastings made one of business history's most counterintuitive moves in 2007, Netflix was thriving with its DVD by mail service, but Hastings announced they were betting their future on streaming, a technology that barely worked and most customers didn't want. His own board questioned the decision. Wall Street punished the stock. Customers complained loudly. But Hastings had seen the data. Internet speeds were improving. Streaming costs were falling. DVD growth was slowing. The original plan that built Netflix was becoming its limitation. Meanwhile, Blockbuster's leadership couldn't abandon their profitable late fee model, even as evidence mounted that customers hated it. Why is changing course so terrifying for leaders? Because we've been taught that consistency equals strength. Admitting error feels like admitting incompetence. We worry that people will lose faith in our judgment, so we stick with decisions long past their expiration date, throwing good resources after bad ones. This thinking treats pivoting as failure when it's actually intelligence. The world changes faster than our plans can keep up. New information emerges, assumptions prove wrong, markets shift. The leaders who thrive are those who treat course correction as a normal part of leadership, not a character flaw. Andy Grove at Intel exemplified this mindset. When he realized Intel's memory business was dying, he didn't cling to the company's original identity. He shifted everything to microprocessors, explaining to employees that the old strategy had worked until it didn't. His transparency preserved trust even during massive layoffs. The key is how you communicate the change. Don't pretend you saw it coming. Share your original reasoning honestly. Explain what new evidence changed your mind. Focus on serving the mission rather than protecting your ego. People respect leaders who admit mistakes more than those who compound them. Start small. Practice changing your mind on low-stakes decisions. When you realize you've chosen the wrong restaurant, say so and suggest alternatives. When a meeting format isn't working, stop and try something else. These small acts of flexibility build the muscle memory needed for bigger pivots. Create systems that surface contrary evidence early. Ask teammates to play devil's advocate. Set review dates for major decisions. Build feedback loops that catch problems before they become disasters. The goal isn't to avoid all mistakes, but to catch and correct them quickly. The most dangerous phrase in any organization is, "We've already invested too much to quit now." What matters is the best path forward from where you stand today, not justifying where you've been. Part 4. Wisdom for the long game. Your reputation survives longer than your quarterly results, and that distinction changes everything about how you choose. Warren Buffett built Berkshire Hathaway by making decisions he could defend 30 years later. While other executives chased quick profits, Buffett asked a different question. Will I be proud of this choice when I'm old? This simple filter changed everything. When the dot-com bubble tempted everyone to abandon value investing, Berkshire stuck to its principles. They looked foolish for years. Then the bubble burst, and suddenly their steady approach looked brilliant again. The difference between short-term wins and long-term wisdom shows up in how leaders treat people during tough times. In 2008, while competitors laid off workers to boost quarterly numbers, Costco kept its workforce intact. CEO Jim Sinegal believed that employee loyalty couldn't be rebuilt once broken. The decision hurt short-term profits, but created a workforce so committed that Costco's employee turnover remains the lowest in retail. Think about the decisions that built your current reputation. Which choices do you remember most clearly after 5 years? Usually, it's not the clever tactical moves or the quarterly numbers you hit. It's the moments you chose integrity over expedience. The time you admitted a mistake publicly. The day you defended a teammate who couldn't defend themselves. The project you killed because it was right, not popular. Great leaders treat their decision-making process like compound interest. Each choice either builds or erodes the trust account they've created with others. A single bad decision won't destroy years of good judgment, but a pattern of short-term thinking will. Reid Hoffman, LinkedIn's founder, calls this playing infinite games. Making moves that let you keep playing rather than winning any single round. This longer view changes how you measure success. Instead of asking, "Did I win this quarter?" you ask, "Am I building something that lasts?" The scorecard shifts from immediate results to sustainable relationships, from perfect predictions to consistent principles, from never being wrong to being useful when it matters most. Your decision-making legacy isn't the percentage of calls you got right. It's whether people trust you with the next hard choice when uncertainty hits again. That trust compounds over decades of small decisions made with future consequences in mind.